He heard the knock again, too soft for a man, too high for an animal, too steady to be the wind. And when he finally opened the door, the last thing he expected to see on his lonely mountain was a baby Bigfoot holding a stick like a gift. He didn't know it yet, but that tiny creature had chosen him, and nothing in his quiet life would ever be the same again. The snow had been falling since dawn, thickening the silence until even the creek below the ridge sounded muted and far away. Ryan had grown used to that kind of quiet, empty, heavy, the kind that wrapped around the cabin like a second skin. Nights were the worst, when the world thinned out and the dark felt like an old memory breathing on his neck. That evening he sat by the stove, stirring a pot of thin soup, trying not to think about how little was left for tomorrow. Rust slept curled near his boots, twitching in a dream he couldn't share. The first knock didn't even sound like a knock, more like a hesitant tap, the kind a child might make when unsure if anyone inside would answer. Ryan froze mid-stir, the wooden spoon dripping broth back into the pot. Rust's head lifted instantly, ears pricked, eyes sharp. Ryan waited, breath held, thinking maybe the wind had tossed a branch against the boards. But then it came again, 2 quick taps, higher on the door than a raccoon would reach. A strange shiver ran through him, the kind that didn't come from cold, but from recognition of something out of place. He approached the door slowly, each floorboard giving a soft complaint under his weight. For a moment, his reflection glimmered in the frost on the window, a lean boy with tired eyes, a patched coat, and a life that felt too big for him some days and too small on others. He gripped the latch, waited one more beat, then eased the door open. Snow swirled in on a gust, brushing his face. At first he saw nothing, just white drifts, pines hunched under ice, and the familiar emptiness. Then his gaze dropped, and the world shifted in a single heartbeat. A creature stood in the snow, no taller than his chest, covered in shaggy brown-gray fur that looked heavy with cold. Its arms were long for its body, hanging almost to its knees, and its hands were broad like a person's but wider, stronger. What caught him most were the eyes, huge, dark, watching him with a mixture of fear and stubborn bravery. The creature clutched a broken stick, its knuckles pale beneath the fur. Ryan's breath fogged the air between them, a fragile bridge. Russ didn't bark. He simply stood beside Ryan like a second door hinge, steady and curious. "Hey," Ryan whispered, unsure why his voice came out so soft. The creature flinched but didn't run. Snow stuck to its fur in tiny crystals. It was shivering, barely noticeable but constant. Something about that trembling hit him harder than the sight itself. He knew that kind of cold, the kind that made your thoughts slow and your bones ache. He thought about shutting the door. He also thought about how many doors had been shut on him over the years, how many times he'd stood hesitating in the cold, wishing someone would let him in. He stepped slightly aside. Warm air from the cabin drifted toward the creature, carrying the faint smell of broth. Its nostrils widened. It took one cautious step forward, toes curling in the snow, then stopped right at the threshold, unsure if crossing meant danger. Ryan crouched, placing the bowl on the floor near the door. The stew was thin, hardly a meal, but it was warm. "I don't have much," he murmured, "but this part is yours if you want it." The creature watched him for a long, trembling moment before dropping into a squat. Its fingers dipped into the bowl with surprising gentleness. It ate slowly at first, tasting each bit like it wasn't sure whether to trust the flavor. Then hunger overruled fear, and it consumed the rest with quiet determination. When it finished, it placed the empty bowl exactly where Ryan had set it, as if respecting some unspoken ritual. Ryan didn't move. Neither did Rust. The creature studied both of them with an intensity that made him feel seen in a way people rarely bothered with. Then, just as silently as it had arrived, it backed up into the snow, turned, and vanished into the tree line without a sound. The door shut gently, but Ryan's heartbeat stayed loud long afterward. He sat on the floor beside Rust, who nudged his arm as if asking why he hadn't been fed first. Ryan scratched the dog's ears and let out a quiet breath. "I think we just met something they say doesn't exist," he said. Rust blinked slowly, unimpressed. Outside, the snow deepened, piling against the cabin walls. Inside, the stove crackled, and Ryan felt strangely awake, like a veil had been lifted. The mountain was full of stories, but he'd never expected one to knock on his door. The next night, he didn't expect the knock. Not really. But part of him waited for it anyway, pretending he wasn't listening for every sound the wind dragged across the boards. When it finally came, 3 soft taps in the same hesitant rhythm. His spoon clattered into the pot. Rust bounded to the door, tail low but wagging. Ryan opened it slower this time, careful not to spook whatever might be waiting. There it was again. The small creature with wide eyes and trembling fur. And in its hand, instead of a stick, it held something else. A pine cone, perfectly intact. The pine cone wasn't special, not in any ordinary way, but the creature held it out like an offering, a trade, a wordless thank you. Ryan accepted it, feeling the rough scales scratch his palm. The creature seemed relieved. Tonight he'd saved a little extra food, not much, but enough for a second bowl. He placed it down. The creature ate with the same quiet focus, pausing only when Rust sneezed loudly. It startled, then made a tiny sound Ryan could only describe as a soft hum, almost like laughter. Something in the warm flicker of its eyes eased the room's shadows. After it left, Ryan placed the pine cone on the shelf above his bed, next to the few things he kept: a pocket knife, a photo of his mother, and a smooth stone he'd carried since childhood. It was strange how quickly the little creature's presence shifted the air in the cabin. The place felt less like a hiding spot and more like a waiting place, a place where something might happen. He slept lightly that night, not from fear, but from a strange, gentle anticipation. Even Rust sprawled across his blanket, snoring like he finally had a reason to guard something meaningful. On the 3rd night, the creature came earlier, knocking before Ryan had even finished cooking. Snow still clung to its fur, but tonight it wasn't shivering as much. It sat closer to the stove, warming its long fingers cautiously. Ryan pretended not to watch, giving it space, letting it set the rules. Sometimes kindness needed room, not attention. When it finished eating, the creature picked up the empty bowl, studied it, then set it down in a new spot, as if arranging things with intention. Ryan didn't understand the gesture, but Rust wagged his tail like he did. Days passed, and each night, the creature returned. Not always hungry. Sometimes it came just to sit by the stove, head tilted, listening to the fire crackle. Sometimes it brought small things: a smooth stone, a tuft of moss, feathers, gifts of the mountain, offerings of trust. Ryan began preparing 2 portions automatically, one for him, one for the visitor. He rationed carefully, stretching what little he had. Sharing made things tighter, but it also made something warmer inside him, something that had been empty for too long. Rust even started placing his favorite toy, a matted, half-chewed ball, near the door. One night, the creature finally noticed the ball. It picked it up with long fingers, sniffed it, then squeaked it once. The sound made it jump back like it had been hit with static. Rust wobbled forward, tail sweeping the floor, and nudged the creature's knee gently. They exchanged a moment of silent understanding. Then the creature squeezed the ball again, slower this time, watching Rust's reaction with bright curiosity. For the first time, Ryan heard it make a sound. A soft, breathy chuff, almost like suppressed laughter. Rust barked once, delighted. The cabin felt impossibly alive. With each passing night, the creature grew bolder, stepping deeper into the cabin, letting the warmth soak into its bones. Its eyes became less fearful, more thoughtful, as if studying Ryan the way one studies the sky before a storm, trying to understand its patterns. Ryan spoke sometimes, quiet words that didn't need answers. "Long day today," he'd murmur. Or, "You're looking healthier." The creature always listened, head cocked slightly, absorbing tone more than meaning. And every time it left, Ryan found himself standing in the doorway long after it disappeared, staring at the place where its footprints ended. But something bothered him. The creature always came alone. Bigfoot legends all said the same thing. Where there was one, there were more. A child wandering nightly through snow without protection didn't make sense. But every time Ryan stepped outside to look for tracks, there were only the small ones, wandering erratically through drifts and brush. No larger prints, no guardians. It gnawed at him, an unease he couldn't shake. The mountain was dangerous this time of year. Predators lurked, storms moved fast, and loneliness, he knew better than anything, could shred a living thing as quickly as hunger. One evening, the creature arrived limping slightly. The fur on its calf was matted with a thin line of dried blood. Ryan's breath tightened. He knelt slowly, hands open, showing he meant no harm. The creature hesitated, then allowed him to look. It wasn't a deep wound, likely a sharp branch or a rock, but it spoke of wandering far, alone, through places even seasoned hikers avoided. Ryan cleaned it gently with warm water. The creature winced, but didn't pull away. When he wrapped it with a strip of cloth, something softened in its gaze, a quiet acceptance he didn't expect. That night, the creature didn't hurry to leave. It sat by the door long after the bowl was emptied, long after Rust had fallen asleep with his head on its foot. Snow fell heavily outside, wind shaking the cabin walls. The creature watched the storm through the small window, chest rising and falling slowly. For the first time it looked unsure, like going back into the dark hurt more than staying. Ryan leaned against the wall, arms crossed, pretending not to care, though every part of him felt pulled by the quiet plea he saw in those dark eyes. "Stay a little longer if you need to," he whispered, unsure if the creature understood, but needing to say it anyway. The creature blinked slowly, then settled near the stove, folding its long arms around itself. Ryan sat beside it, leaving enough space to be respectful, yet close enough for warmth to reach both of them. The fire cast soft shadows on the walls, turning the small cabin into something gentler than it had ever felt before. Rust snored, the storm howled, and for the first time in years, Ryan didn't feel like he was enduring winter. He felt like he was sharing it. When the creature finally rose to leave, it paused at the threshold and turned back. It lifted one hand and pressed two fingers softly against Ryan's chest, right over his heart. The touch was brief, almost tentative, but it vibrated through him like something ancient and solemn. Then it stepped into the snow and disappeared into the storm. Ryan stood there long after the wind erased its tracks, hand resting where the creature had touched him. Something had shifted. not just between them, but inside him. And deep in the mountains, something was beginning to move in response. The storm eased by morning, but the mountain felt strangely awake, as if every tree and stone had been listening during the night. Ryan barely slept. He kept replaying the moment the creature touched his chest. Gentle, sure, as if marking him with something he couldn't see. Rust stayed close, pacing between the window and the door with quiet anxiety. Ryan tried to focus on chores, but his hands felt clumsy, his thoughts too loud. The creature had always left and returned, but last night had been different. Last night, it had hesitated. Last night, it had wanted to stay. He checked the clearing for tracks, expecting to find the same zigzag trail the youngster usually left. Instead, he found something unsettling. The prints were deeper than usual, pressed hard into the snow, spaced farther apart, as if the creature had run, not walked, as if something had chased it. Ryan crouched beside the tracks, brushing snow aside, his stomach tightening. Rust growled quietly, nose testing the air. The forest was still, too still, the silence carrying a brittle edge. Ryan straightened slowly. Something scared him, he whispered. And whatever it was, it had come close. Too close. All day he felt the tension like a thread pulled too tight. He chopped wood, checked snares, hauled water, anything to quiet the worry climbing inside him. But every time he glanced at the tree line, he expected to see a small shape hurtling toward the cabin. Snow clouds piled over the peaks like bruises, promising another storm. He set aside food again, a routine that had become instinct rather than choice. But as night crept over the valley and the wind sharpened, the one thing he waited for didn't come. No soft knock, no hesitant taps, no creature. The absence felt louder than any noise. Rust whined, pacing in small, nervous loops near the door. Ryan threw on his coat, grabbed a lantern, and stepped into the frigid darkness. Snow swallowed sound instantly, muting the world. He followed the creature's tracks until they faded into the deep woods, where shadows swallowed everything. "This is stupid," he muttered, but he kept going. The cold bit his face, his boots sank deep, and every breath burned. But turning back felt impossible. The creature had come to him night after night. Tonight, Ryan had to go to him. He moved between the trees, lantern swinging gently, casting brief arcs of gold across bark and snow. The forest felt enormous, older than memory. Ryan's breath fogged the air, rising like small ghosts. Then Rust stiffened, growling low. Ryan froze. Ahead, partially hidden behind a fallen pine, he saw movement, a huddled shape curled in the snow. The creature. Its fur was crusted with frost, breaths shallow and rapid. It didn't look up, even as the lantern light touched it. Ryan felt something inside him twist painfully. He knelt fast, brushing snow away, voice breaking. Hey, I'm here." The creature shifted, weakly, eyes half open, dark and glassy. Its wound had reopened. Blood matted the fur around its calf, staining the snow. Ryan's throat tightened. "You should have come back," he whispered, but the words held no blame, only fear. He lifted the creature cautiously. It weighed more than he expected, dense with muscle under the fur. The youngster didn't resist, only leaned into him with a soft, exhausted sound. Rust pressed close, keeping watch behind them as Ryan carried the creature through the trees. The journey back felt endless, every step sharpened by worry. Inside the cabin, warmth wrapped around them like a blanket. Ryan laid the creature near the stove, piling blankets over its shivering frame. He cleaned the wound again, hands steady despite the tremor in his chest. "You're gonna be all right," he murmured. "Just stay with me." The creature watched him with dull, half-lidded eyes, breathing shallowly. Rust lay beside it protectively, tail curled toward its side. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the shutters. Inside, the room felt too small for the weight of the moment. Ryan didn't realize he was whispering "please" until the 10th time. Night stretched long and sleepless. Every small change in the creature's breathing made Ryan sit up straighter. Once, it tried to push itself upright, but collapsed instantly, panting. Ryan steadied it, murmuring reassurance. "You don't have to go anywhere, just rest." He laid a hand lightly across its shoulder. Beneath the thick fur, he felt bones, thin, young, fragile. Rust dozed with his head against the creature's arm, as if lending it warmth. Hours passed. Snow battered the cabin. Fire crackled. And Ryan stayed awake, guarding something he'd never expected to care about this deeply. Just before dawn, the creature stirred. Not just movement, purpose. Its breathing steadied, eyes sharpening slightly. It reached toward Ryan's chest again, pressing 2 fingers in the same spot as before. But this time, the gesture was weaker, trembling. Ryan caught its hand, holding it carefully. "You don't have to thank me," he whispered, swallowing hard. "You just have to stay." The creature blinked slowly, as if absorbing every word through tone instead of meaning. Then, for the first time, it leaned its forehead against his arm, an instinctive gesture of trust that left Ryan breathless. By midday, the creature could sit upright. Ryan fed it broth in small, careful portions, watching strength return to its limbs little by little. Rust remained glued to its side, tail thumping occasionally. Something tender had grown between them, 2 lonely creatures who recognized a kindred shape in each other. Outside, the storm eased, sunlight filtering weakly through clouds. Ryan opened the window for a moment. Cold air rushed in, carrying the crisp scent of pines. The creature inhaled deeply, nose twitching, as if reading messages in the wind he couldn't decipher. But the mountain held more than wind. Rust stiffened first, ears tilting. Then the creature froze entirely, body tensing, eyes widening. It turned its head toward the clearing. Ryan felt it too, a shift in the air, a faint vibration in the floorboards, like distant footsteps, heavy ones, close. The creature's breathing quickened, but not with fear, with recognition. It stood shakily, moving toward the door, wobbling but determined. Ryan steadied it. "Easy. You're not ready to." But the creature touched his hand briefly, a look passing between them that said, "You need to see this." Ryan opened the door slowly. Cold flooded in. Then his breath caught. At the far edge of the clearing, half shrouded in drifting snow, shapes emerged. Large ones, far larger than the youngster. Silhouettes, tall as bears, broad as the old stories claimed. Bigfoots, real ones. They moved with quiet purpose, fur shifting like shadows within shadows. Rust retreated a step, unsure, but didn't bark. The youngster leaned against Ryan, trembling, not with fear, but with urgency. These were its kin, its family, its world. But they didn't approach the cabin. They stopped at the tree line, watching. 7 of them, 7 towering figures, half hidden, half revealed. Their eyes glowed faintly in the pale light, not unnaturally, but like deep wells reflecting snow. One stepped forward, massive, shoulders like carved stone, fur streaked with gray, a leader. Ryan's chest tightened. This wasn't a confrontation. It was an evaluation. The leader raised its head, inhaling the air between them. Then it made a low, resonant sound, more vibration than voice, a note that seemed to echo between the trees. The youngster answered with a quick chuff, pressing closer to Ryan, like introducing him. The leader stepped closer, snow crunching beneath its enormous feet. Ryan held his ground, though instinct screamed at him to retreat. The creature beside him stood straighter, as if leaning on his presence. The leader studied Ryan with unnervingly human intelligence, gaze traveling from his face to his hands to the small wounded youngster at his side. Then, in a motion so deliberate it felt ceremonial, the leader touched its chest with one hand, and then extended that hand toward Ryan, palm open, not threatening, acknowledging, accepting. Ryan exhaled shakily. He lifted his hand slowly, letting his palm mirror the gesture. Open, empty, harmless. The leader's hand hovered inches from his, the cold radiating off its fur like heat in reverse. It didn't touch him, just acknowledged the space between them. Then it lowered its arm and stepped back. Another Bigfoot, smaller, younger, moved forward, carrying something wrapped in layers of woven grass. It laid the bundle gently at the edge of the porch, then withdrew. Ryan hesitated, then crouched to unwrap it. Inside lay a collection of dried roots, berries, and herbs, medicinals, food, offerings, not random, not simple. Gifts. Ryan looked up, heart thudding. The Bigfoots watched silently, their expressions unreadable but not cold. The youngster made a soft hum, nudging Ryan's elbow. This was their answer, their thanks, their acknowledgement of the boy who fed one of their own. Ryan bowed his head slightly, not sure if they understood the gesture, but offering respect in the only way he knew. The leader let out another low tone, softer this time, and the group began to retreat into the trees, slow, deliberate, dignified. But the youngster didn't follow. It stayed beside Ryan, gripping his sleeve lightly. The leader paused at the tree line, turning to watch. A silent question hung in the air. Will you come? The youngster hesitated, torn. It looked up at Ryan, then at the forest, then back again. Ryan felt the ache of the moment tear through him. You should go, he whispered, voice breaking. They're your family. The creature touched his chest one last time. 2 fingers, gentle and sure. Then it stepped backward, eyes never leaving his, until the distance pulled them apart. When the youngster reached the others, the leader placed a massive hand lightly on its shoulder, guiding it. They moved as one into the deep woods, their forms melting into the shadows between the pines. Ryan stood on the porch long after they disappeared, the cold biting his cheeks, but he barely felt it. Something vast and wordless had passed between them. Rust leaned against his leg, whining softly. I know, Ryan whispered. I miss him too. The clearing felt impossibly empty now, as if the mountain had exhaled and taken something precious with it. Days passed. Snowstorms came and went. Life returned to its rhythms, chopping wood, melting snow for water, repairing the roof, feeding rust. But every evening Ryan found himself glancing at the doorway, listening for that small, familiar knock. It never came. And yet, sometimes he found small things on the porch in the morning. A perfect pine cone, a feather with silver stripes, an odd-shaped stone. Gifts, messages, proof that the youngster hadn't forgotten. Proof that somewhere in the deep labyrinth of the mountain, a little Bigfoot still thought of him. The night he found the last gift, a smooth stone with 2 faint lines gouged across it, almost like the mark of 2 fingertips. Ryan held it against his chest, right over the spot the creature had touched. Rust nudged him, tail wagging gently. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a familiar hum he almost recognized. Ryan smiled softly in the dim glow of the lantern. The mountain hadn't taken something from him. It had given something back. Far in the forest, a distant echo answered the wind, a promise that their story wasn't over. Not yet.